Hi everyone, this is Angela Forker from Precious Baby Photography, and I'm here today with my new valYOUable series. Last month, I had the great pleasure of doing a session with Brandon Upson. He is married to my niece and is a father who is actively present in the lives of their 3 beautiful children. He is also the founder and executive director of Amplify Action. In his own words, Amplify Action Fund was started to enhance the civic education and civil mobilization of Black men and to empower those men to reshape their communities. Brandon's story is a little bit longer than most of the stories in my valYOUable series, but his story is so compelling and these stories are so important that I really couldn't pull anything out. Brandon talks about how he came from a single-parent home with his father in prison most of his life. He tells about his time in the military service and overcoming PTSD. He shares how the power of affirmation in his home helped him to always know that he was made for something great. As you listen to his story, be sure to listen to the last 5 minutes where he talks about some of the stories of his great-grandparents when they were under slavery and of a young girl, Brandon's great-grandmother, who protected her father from the KKK, and how Brandon's family went from being cursed to blessed. In this story, we see the power of affirmation and the power of prayer. It is so amazing to see that despite all the odds, Brandon's life has become something great, and he is making a huge difference in the lives of many around him.
So my name is Brandon Upson. I was born and raised in Aiken, South Carolina. The oldest child of my mom, second oldest child of my father. So with my mom, it's just me and my sister Sabrina. With my dad, it's more than 6 of us. So growing up in Aiken, you know, my father was never a part of my life that I experienced in the traditional sense. Since I was about 3 months old, he was incarcerated. Wow. And it started out with him being in the car with some guys who had just robbed a liquor store. And he also got arrested, even though he had no part in the crime. Wow. But it was the hand of one, hand of all law. Yeah. But then after that, he just got caught up in the cycle of you get out, you break probation, you go back to jail. You get out, you do something stupid, you go back in. And now he is serving a life sentence on a 3-strike felony charge, right? So growing up, there's a lot of, like, my first memory, because I can remember back to when I was about 10 months old, is my first memory.
Wow.
Being in a swimming pool outside of our house in Governor's Acres Park. And I always ask my mom about that time. She was like, you were only 10 years old, 10 months old. How do you remember that? But I remember it very vividly. But not too long after that is my first memory of my father in jail. It was because I remember the paintings on the wall. And for most of my life, going past those paintings, going through the doors, going through security, to see my father was the norm. Growing up for me. And my grandmother Florine coming to pick me up, twice a month, 3 times a month. So because of that relationship, I never really got a chance to learn that side of my family, the Tyler side. Because even now, my last name Upson is my mom's last name.
Oh, wow.
I never had his last name. So to fill in the void, even though my mom is the 7th child out of 10 living children, they had a total of 13 if you include miscarriages. And my mom, my aunt, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother all took a part in raising me.
Oh, that's amazing.
So these strong women bringing me up, around the time I was born, my great-grandfather passed away of cancer. And it was one of those perfect storms of a family scenario where the patriarch passes away shortly after a child is born. So I felt like all of that love that they had from that void that was missing in our family, they gave to me. So very
sweet.
early on, I remember like them putting me in front of the mirror and saying, "Who's the smartest? Who's the most beautiful baby?" And I would say, "Me, I am."
That's so beautiful.
So, growing up, there was never, ever a doubt in my mind that I was smart or that I was like worthy or that I was capable.
Wow.
Because 6 years old, I felt like I was a leader in my family.
That is incredible.
I remember praying over my grandfather, and we'd be in the living room with the whole family, and I'll be laying hands on my family and praying for each of them for whatever, especially my grandfather. That was a reoccurring theme. And they used to say I was going to be a pastor and whatever. But, I never thought that. But all of that, my grandmother used to always say, "You're the one." Like, you're the one that will take our family, out of this hole that we're in. And once I always wondered, what hole is she talking about, But we were poor. I didn't realize how poor until I was older.
But I love it that you didn't realize it.
Never, didn't at all. 3-bedroom carpenter house, ranch house. And it was my grandmother, my grandfather, at times my aunt, and my cousin, Chris, myself, my sister, my mom.
Wow.
And whatever number of uncles at the time. So, growing up, sleeping on a pallet on the floor was, just your spot.
Wow.
Because there were so many of us. And when it rained outside, I would be the one grabbing the buckets to get the water as it dripped through the roof. But growing up, not having hot water in the house, having to boil your water to take a bath or wash out of the sink, just was a norm. Figuring out how to make little things stretch for a big family, just not knowing that I was being taught how to survive. And our family had been in this perpetual state of survival to where it was not something that we observe with someone thriving and prospering, especially economically. My uncles would tell me from middle school up, this is the Upson curse.
Oh, wow.
And our family's cursed.
Oh, my.
And I never believed it. I always wanted to prove them wrong.
Oh, that's amazing. So, I love that.
So, like, in high school, like, I just always felt this profound sense of duty, first over my family. But then when I was in the 10th grade, the trade towers were attacked. And immediately I was like, I got to join the military. I got to join the Marines. Like, I have to help protect our country, but when I went to the Marines, I was too young. So I was 17 that next year when I was a junior. So I was leaving the recruiter's table for the Marines, and the Army National Guard recruiter came and was like, "Brandon, come here. Let me let me tell you something.
Let me tell you something.
You can actually do this." So the recruiter, we talked. I took the ASVAB, scored really, really well. I think I had like a 98 or 97 on the test. So anything I wanted to do, I could do. And I just knew I wanted to go Special Forces. But I needed my mom's signature. So I told him, my mom works 2 jobs. When she gets off her second job, she's too tired to even comprehend. So if you show up about 9:15, we can get this done. He showed up at 9:15 on the dot.
Wow.
She was already like decompressing, relaxing, getting ready to go to bed. And then I just laid it on her. And so she was like, so he's not going to go to Iraq. Like, I'll do this if you can guarantee me he doesn't go to Iraq. And the idiot of a recruiter said, oh, no. With him doing this, because I went in as a nuclear biological chemical specialist.
Wow.
And he's like, yeah, he'll never see combat. And I'm looking at it, I know better. I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
She signed it. I went to basic training that summer. Then when I graduated from high school, I went and finished my specialty training. When I came back, my name was number 1 on the deployment list.
Oh, wow.
She was upset. She let him have it every day I was deployed.
Oh.
But the beauty of it was I deployed with a bunch of guys from Saluda, South Carolina. They were in the National Guard unit there, and I went active duty. And we all attached to a unit out of Tacoma, Washington. So I lived in Tacoma for a while, getting ready to deploy. And some of those guys had been in Iraq, specifically 3 and 4 times at that time.
Wow.
And it was only 2005. I just graduated high school, and a good friend of mine had just come back from Iraq and volunteered to go back. He was like my big brother. He's like, I can't allow you to go there by yourself.
Wow.
So the difference was my MOS, chemical, nuclear, biological, radiological specialist, put me in headquarters. Him, being a combat engineer, put him on the front line.
Oh, wow.
So even though he volunteered to go to war to protect me, I was basically, I could have stayed in the office the entire time.
Wow.
And never saw a theater outside of the gates. So I started reclassing and getting trained to do other things. Our job there was to find the IEDs that they were putting on the side of the roads, I can't get the word together, but the improvised explosive devices. They would put them in soda cans. They would put them in piles of trash.
Wow.
We found one inside of a donkey,
Wow.
mortar round. So I got retrained, reclassed, and I volunteered on over 100 combat missions.
Wow.
And before I knew it, I was attached to a scout team and got classified as a 50 caliber sniper, and joined a small kill team. And from there, like, the types of missions that I went on were the ones that, there's one time I was the gunner for a mission going through Brassfield, Mora, and we were just fueling up to turn around and go back the other way. And in the distance, I saw what I thought was a flare going up in the air. But, seconds later, just a flash and a bang.
Wow.
And you could hear the shrapnel falling all around us.
Wow.
And that was the first time that I ever felt like we're going to die. We could die.
Yeah.
But when we hauled tail and got into our vehicles and left, I felt like I was almost responsible for us dying because I saw it from a distance and didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And that's just such profound guilt, even though none of us were injured. That changed the way that I interacted with the world around me.
Wow.
From then on, if I saw something, I said something.
Yeah.
Oh,
interesting.
And that's how I am now. If I see something I feel is wrong, I act on it, and without fear repercussions, because I understand how close I've come to death because I didn't say anything.
Wow.
But in the past. But then I started thinking about it, and it was like, man, I had to thank my grandmother for praying because that was not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Like, that mortar round was supposed to take us out.
Oh. Wow.
And, there were other instances where we were, like, driving down this narrow road that just had huge craters, and we're just weaving around the craters, clearing this route that a mission was coming down. And there was a big spotlight on us, a fog light. And we were the lead vehicle. And then as soon as we turn around, we see a pressure switch on the road. And we slam on the brakes. The TC yells, all stop. And literally, we could not see the pressure switch anymore. The vehicle was so close to it.
Wow.
So we backed away. We called EOD. When they couldn't even, normally they would blow it up in place, but it was 500 pounds worth of explosives.
Oh, wow. Oh, my.
So literally, it was out of the view of our camera. It was so close. But that was another time I had to call home. And my mom was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? You know, she could hear it in my voice, and I'm trying not to, you know, scare her. Yeah. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm just up here on base. You know, we're going to a party later, you know. Oh, and I just wanted to hear their voices, you know. Yeah. And I had to thank my grandmother again, because I just felt like her prayers covered me. And I was never afraid of death, even when it came close to us. I always felt like I was going to make it home. And even some of the things I saw never impacted me, because I felt like it was almost like I was walking out of body, like observing the experience and not living the experience while I was in country. Not until I came home. And once I came home, it's like everything that I should have felt there, I started feeling as a civilian walking around. Yeah. And it all just crashed on me at one time. I was in Sam's Club. This woman had a whole hijab on, and she just came around the corner and just startled me. And I was like, whoa, I haven't seen one of those since I was in Iraq, you know? But then that night, like, the bed was soaked from sweat. Like, I just was so, I never had a nightmare so, like, terrifying. And then I didn't feel like myself, like, anymore. And I was in a relationship, and she would always say stuff about how I was acting, or how I was, like, distant, or, like, showing no emotion or whatever. I never even realized it until, like, an incident that sparked my anxiety to where I had a full-blown panic attack. And I was like, maybe I should talk to somebody. You know? And then in talking to my therapist, I realized how I had isolated myself from everyone that I did not, that I could control their access to me. If it didn't deal with school or work, I was rarely talking to them. Even my own mom, I was like, she would call me and I wouldn't answer. You know, or someone that wasn't essential for a project that I was working on would call, and I just didn't have it in me to even have a conversation with people. And it was something I had to work through even now. You know, I went to the VA, and the first time I spoke to someone, they just gave me a sack of pills.
Oh, my.
And because I had migraines for a very long time. And they just gave me a sack of pills. It was in a plastic bag with no instructions. Like, I asked her how long I had to take them. She's like, forever. Get used to it. Yeah, it was horrible. But during that time, like, I started questioning, like, people telling me that I was great at what I was doing, or I should be doing something else. And I was just in constant, like, questioning mode. Like, I'm not good enough for that. Like, y'all are just blowing smoke. Like, I can't do that. Or if I do that and then something happens, I have to let people know that I have PTSD. And then everyone would be terrified to be around me, because they think that I'm like the crazy person, right? And then my godmother one day told me, she's like, Brandon, I see the stress in your face. Like, it was so bad. I had patches of hair missing on my head. And she was like, you are too blessed to be stressed. And at this time, my grandmother had passed away. She said, what would Miss Lily tell you right now? And that snapped me out of it.
Wow.
Literally, I was like, my grandmother would put her foot in my butt right now. You know, and it just reminded me who I was in that one moment. You're too blessed to be stressed. And I started making real life moves to bring myself back to the Brandon that I would be proud of, right? And then God blessed me with my wife today.
Yeah.
Like not even a year later,
Oh, wow.
we met each other in a ballroom dance class.
That's so cool.
Literally, we've been dancing ever since.
Oh.
You know, and like even all of those experiences, like going into the military, making it back, overcoming and accomplishing things that the statistics say I should not have accomplished. The fact that I grew up in rural South Carolina, my father in jail, you know, poor family, young black man, I should have either went into the streets myself, because I had plenty of uncles that were in gangs and in the streets. I should have followed suit and either went to jail or to the cemetery. But instead, I really see the intercession of my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and they would tell me stories that made me feel connected to another part of our lineage and our history that I knew could go forward, even though my uncle said we were cursed.
Wow.
My grandmother, this is the last story I would share, because I would say, why am I different than everybody else? Am I the only one thinking like this? But then my great-grandmother, born in Edgefield, South Carolina, her mother died when she was 6 years old. She was raised by her grandmother, who was a former slave in Edgefield, South Carolina, who would tell my grandmother about living on the plantation in Edgefield and how she couldn't handle being whipped.
Yeah. Oh. Wow.
And, you know, my grandmother's father was legally blind. He got attacked by a group of white men in Edgefield, and they beat him so bad that they blinded him.
Oh, that's terrible. Oh.
This man would grow produce on land, the land that they owned at the time, and he couldn't sell it in Edgefield. He had to walk from Edgefield to Aiken to sell his produce. And he couldn't take the main roads because he was already a target. So he would take paths through the woods to make it to Aiken. So you have a blind man with his produce walking in a car from Edgefield to Aiken. Is about a 40 minute drive.
Wow.
He would walk and sell his stuff until it was gone and then make it back. And he was known for knowing his money. Like you couldn't
because
get over him.
Blind.
Yes, you couldn't get over on him. And he provided for his family. And this same
That's incredible.
the same great grandmother, Sophie, who my daughter's named after, she would, one time the Klan came looking for her dad. And she stood in front of her mom, her aunt, and her grandmother to tell them how they weren't going to mess with her daddy. He was hiding in the back of the house. And that woman, Sophie Upson, became the first black woman in Aiken to own an ice cream parlor.
Oh, that's
She was
beautiful.
the first black woman in our community to own her own house.
Wow.
First one to have an automobile. And she was such a spitfire. And, you know, I came to realize in my head when I was like, am I the only one like this in our family? I was comparing myself to the men in my family. When it was the women in the family who really undergirded us and lifted us up, raised us up.
Oh, man, that's powerful.
And even to this day, I look at my daughters and my son now, and I see my grandparents in them. And I do everything I do now for them and for those other kids that are looking at the work we do today. So when I'm out registering voters or advocating for policy or standing on something that's so unpopular, even recently standing up for something that, you know, has death threats coming my way, I know that I've been through worse. but it's necessary because the work I do now is for the generations to come.
Yeah.
And God is in the center of everything we do. And the prayers of my grandmother still live on. And I feel it every single day because doors open, windows of opportunity open in the most remarkable ways.
Wow.
And I can't imagine planning the life that we live right now.
Yeah.
It can only be through the grace of God that we are where we are today. If I ever gave anybody any type of advice, some people ask me for advice, I let them know that if you just keep moving forward, no matter what, you'll make it out the other side.
That's right.
Just keep moving forward and trust in yourself and trust in God. And all things are possible.
Yes.
Like, I have nothing else to say because it's almost that simple and that complex.
Yes, so powerful. I want to add something that your family is not cursed. Your family is blessed by God.
Absolutely.